Welcome back, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Janice Malillo, the host of Stories That Inspire Us, the author series. Now, yes, you know I love to read, and I love this author series. We've had some amazing authors on, and I got to tell you, today's author, this is one of those books I am going to have to read again with the workbook. Just saying, it is phenomenal. I want to introduce to the Stories podcast the amazing Sarah Duran. Welcome, Sarah. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
That is so awesome. You know, your book, and by the way, you are the founder and CEO of Fruition Initiatives, and I absolutely love that name. It's very catchy. In your book, How to Start a Business of One Instant. Oh, let's see, I'm already messing it up. How to Start a Business of One Instant Freelancer. The shortest path to independent work and money in the bank. And boom, let's start the conversation. First of all, I want to say your book was so well written. I enjoyed reading it. And really from a very practical standpoint, but you say in the beginning of your book, look, this basically, I'm saying it, you know, kind of paraphrasing it, but look, this is what has worked for me. And you really have to go through it and apply what may work for you, because maybe one little specific part in something may not work for somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the journey of solopreneurship for me has been really, in which I think it is for all entrepreneurs to a certain extent, a process of trial and error. And there are always, I think that what I try to provide in the book is a framework for how to get started and how to build a business that gives you what you need. But I think that's the key piece, is in order for a business to give you what you need, the framework shows you sort of how to figure that out, but then you have to build your business that is unique to you.
Oh, that's so absolutely true. And I love how you broke the book down into parts, and then of course chapters. And the very first chapter, why freelancing now? And let me just say, I think the bulk of this conversation is going to be around that specific topic, because I think it is really needed. And by the way, we'll have you back to discuss each and every chapter, just saying. It's that good of a book. Got to get it. So what you initially talk about in the first part of your book was the freelance revolution and what freelancing needs to give you. Simple, right? Mm-hmm. But you break it down even further. And I think if one is starting that entrepreneurship journey, they really need to, what really does that mean to him? Like what emotionally, or that I need to be ready for. And maybe as well, we know there's always unexpected things that pop up. Why now? Why do you think now? I mean, I can think of an obvious answer for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you know, you write a book and then the world progresses after you write the book, right? So there's like even, I think, more statistics that I can share, more recent statistics about why now. But I think at the time that when I wrote the book, we were just coming out of the pandemic. And I think what happened is a lot of people, if you think about like the Great Resignation, for example, a lot of people realized during and after COVID that life was too short to do work that you hated every day. And so lots of people decided to quit their jobs. A lot of those people decided to choose meaning over money, to take big risks about what they wanted to do with their life, and to not have what some people think is the security associated with like a 9-to-5 job working for someone else, which we could talk about it at a different time, but that is a myth. I actually think freelancing is much more secure than a 9-to-5 job. And I think since then I've also seen a bunch of more research and statistics coming out about how the like being able to work from home was sort of this like gateway drug, if so to speak, of people deciding to work for themselves. It helped people find more flexibility in their work environments and realize that like the freedom they could have when they were working more independently. It also helped employers, I think, get used to people not working in the office, which led employers to be more open to hiring freelancers and contractors who weren't quote unquote part of their team. The other statistic that I've seen come out more recently that's super interesting is that the more recent generations are more the younger generations coming into the workforce now are more entrepreneurial than ever. So I think there's a statistic out there where it's like something like 40% of I don't want to use the word kids, but based on how old I am, like people coming out of college are thinking of starting their own business. They're not even deciding to go work a 9-to-5 job and then start their own business. They're just like, I'm just going to go start my own business. And so I think that like the timing is right. The market is more amenable to hiring freelancers. And I think people are realizing the type of freedom that independent work can give them.
That I think is so well said and so true, because I think freelancing really since the pandemic has taken on a meaning of its own. I mean, I go back to my own entrepreneurial journey. I was actually working for a weight loss center, and in September before the pandemic, I was laid off, but I was in the process of starting my own online business. And then, of course, the pandemic happened and my unemployment ran out. And honestly, I was dragging my feet, I admit it. Then I got my rear and gear and of course built up my business. But it's through trial and error. And part of that for me, as I'm sure that you can, well attain to, is that you have to set those boundaries, because part of that, I'm working from home and everyone's like, oh, well, you're not doing anything like, and I'm like, no, this is, these are my firm hours and this is when I don't work. This is when I work. And you have to be true to that. And I think what you were trying to also kind of explain in your book was that you really, that's part of the process of, the second part of that, what freelancing needs to give you that freedom and to set those boundaries and whatnot. I have a question for you. What do you think about boundaries is probably a myth to a lot of people?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, especially for me in particular, it's tricky because I think that like boundaries, quote unquote boundaries, are totally important. And I think like the beauty of the way that I get to work now is that the way that my work, my quote unquote work and my quote unquote life interact together are much more fluid than they were before. And so I think that I think that doing the work up front, like I say in the book, about really thinking about what freelancing needs to give you is super important. That's one of those things that I learned in hindsight. And I don't know a lot of people that think about that up front, which is one of the reasons I wrote the book, is because it's something that I learned later on. Like didn't even want to be a freelancer. It sort of happened by accident. And my business sort of grew organically, and I was just like, oh, this is working. Oh, someone's going to pay me to do this. Oh, someone else is going to pay me to do this. And then it got to the place where I was like, oh, I need to be a lot more intentional about this. But that's not a one and done thing. And so I think in the work that I do with the solopreneurs and the freelancers that I work with and that I coach, is that it's about giving yourself a process and a framework to readjust it constantly. So you may have quote unquote boundaries, but like your boundary like my boundaries during the school year and during the summer are completely different because my daughter's not in school during the summer. So my hours look different. The type of work I do looks different. The number of meetings I do looks different. And so that's just one example of if you are intentional about really thinking about what it needs to give you, which is different based on the day, based on the week, based on the time of year, then you can build your work and your business and your structures around that. But if you don't do that intentional thinking, then it's really hard to do that. And you sort of have to, you end up having to like restructure things in a much different way, as opposed to just building it more intentionally from the get-go.
And you know, how you describe that, and it's specifically for you, and you know, being a mom with children, and now it's the summer, about adjusting that. So I love what you said about you do have to readjust it constantly, but keep the parameters maybe structured to where they need to be, but also be willing to renegotiate or re-navigate. I want to move on to the type of freelancers. I'm a freelancer. I started out as a virtual assistant. I've niched it down even further. I'm a podcast VA and booking and marketing manager. But a lot of what I do is coaching as well, through that coaching my clients on how to do things. And, you know, my husband said to me last night, I don't know, you know, every now and then, I don't understand, like, you know, somebody comes to you and says, oh, Janice, can you help me start a podcast? And they actually pay you for it. And I'm like, what do you think I've been doing? You know, yeah. But yeah, absolutely. I have a passion for podcasting. And I think part of the process of what you describing as boundaries, and also boundaries for your niche. You know, again, I started out as a VA, niched it down even further. And I love how I absolutely love how I'm able to share that passion of podcasting with other entrepreneurs to build their businesses even further without the overwhelm, and knowing that they can say to me, here, do something with this. That's come up a lot today. Somebody said that to me. Here, can you do something with this? Okay. So, you know, I think all around, when you're looking into, for instance, somebody may have a passion or a purpose to become an entrepreneur, like what lights them up, and you really break it down. And you had one, I have to look at my notes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You described 10 freelancers, and I just want to kind of touch upon a couple of them. Of course, the freelancer, I checked that one off, but the creative, I consider myself to be creative. Maybe almost 4 years ago, when I was laid off from my job, I didn't consider myself to be creative. So what would somebody who thinks they may be creative, and maybe somebody else can see that creativeness, what kind of strategies can you give that person if they're thinking about the things that they like to do or that they would be good at?
Yeah, so for the creative, this is like a category of solopreneur where it's like you and I sort of like straddle this category, and like I think the freelancer and maybe the consultant category. And just to like full transparency, these categories are like totally subjective, right? They're like, they overlap, they're Venn diagrams, they're not discrete. Like, I think labeling things is sometimes problematic, but it also helps us like wrap our brains around it a little bit differently. So the creative is like, when I got to a place where I was like, I want to make money off of the creative work that I do. So I'm not doing, I do one-on-one work with my clients, and that's what I consider like the consulting and the freelancing. And then I do what I call like creative work, where I'm like writing, and I'm like making money off of my blog or my Substack. I'm creating courses for people. And so I'm not working necessarily one-on-one with people, but I'm sort of like using my creative skills to put content out into the world that hopefully is helpful to people, and hopefully makes money. But like making money off of content is also very, very challenging. And so I think probably everyone to a certain extent has a creative inside of them. Some people are more creative than others. I think the other interesting category that I find people that get labeled as creative is people who do actual creative work and get paid for it, like a freelancer. So I'm talking about like graphic designers or like illustrators, or photographers. I think you could call those people also quote unquote creatives, where they're doing creative work and like getting paid, trying to get paid for it. For that category in particular, I think it's really interesting because a lot of those folks that would not put myself into that category. I'm a very like right brain type of person, a very type A, logical. But I think for those folks in particular, like often they fall into a category where it's like you go to school for something creative, like art. And you're like, okay, how am I going to make money off of this? Right. And then a lot of people that go and get like creative degrees or have creative skill sets end up taking quote unquote 9-to-5 jobs that aren't actually like giving them that creative outlet. So I find a lot of creatives who are like, I have to work for myself because it's the only way that I can make money doing the creative work that I love. And so I guess the other thing I would say about that category is what I find with a lot of those people is because they're so creative and like left-brained, that sometimes the structural aspects of running a business are hard. The structural aspects of running a business are hard for all of us, but some of us, are naturally more inclined to that than others. And so I think some of the strategies for creative is just like really thinking about how can you build the structures around your work so that you're able to do the creative work that you love and not have to like spend all of your time running your business. Because I think that's the other trap that quote unquote creatives can fall into is like, I went out on my own to be able to do X. And now all I'm doing is like the admin work associated with running my business.
Exactly. And, as I was talking to somebody yesterday, I had said to them, I think the thing that you have to remember is your time is valuable. You have this thing. This is your passion and purpose. This is what you want to do. Well, you are almost at that point where you need to hire maybe somebody to help you with all those little things.
Totally.
The administrative aspect of it.
Yep.
So now I want to kind of put you on the spot a little bit. And this is something that I have always thought about, not even sure how I would even go about doing it, but courses.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult was it for you to create a course? Because I want to create a course. It's like on my long-term goal list. I have no clue to even where to start. What would you suggest for me off the cuff?
Okay. So course, and this is like, it was a pretty natural like skill set for me. I started my career as a teacher. I have a degree in curriculum. So designing a course for me was like the structure of designing it was like pretty intuitive for me. What I would say about designing a course is the first thing I would think about is the word design, and really think about who you're designing for, what is the challenge that they are facing, and then how do you help them solve that challenge. And so I think a lot of times, and I did this with all my courses, I was like, I know exactly what people need, and so I'm just going to create the course. And it turns out that what I thought what people needed is not what they actually needed. And so what I always recommend when I'm designing anything, whether it's a course, whether it's a new offering, whether it's a completely new business, is to do what I call a listening tour. And so you have as many conversations as possible, asking people, like you have a script of questions that you're going to ask them, who are it fall into two categories. The person that you think you're selling the course to. So who is the course for? So how can you have conversations with those people? And then other people who might be serving that same audience. So like you're what some people might refer to as competitors, but I like to refer to them as like colleagues. And so really, I think the first step in designing anything is really just like figuring out what the problem is, like what is the challenge that they're facing, how do they describe that challenge, and then asking them a bunch of questions about that challenge, how it's like showing up in their business, how it's showing up in their life, what they've already tried to solve it. From there, I think like designing the actual course is about taking everything that you learn in that listening tour and sort of sequencing it. So like figuring out like sort of like what I did in the book is like, what do you have to do first? So if you're teaching someone, like maybe yours is about like how to structure a podcast, then it's like sequencing it in a way that makes sense and addresses like I think all the things that you heard when you're doing your initial like listening tour with people. Format wise, like I do mine, I use PowerPoint slides and just like talk through them. So that's the way I like structure mine, is with slides. I know there's like tons of other ways that people structure online courses, but my brain thinks in slide decks, and so that's the way I structure mine. But I really think that the first piece is the most important when you're designing anything, is just like really having conversations with people about like, what is the problem? And then as the expert, as you're listening to them talk about the problem, you are using your expertise to think about how you solve the problem. So they maybe don't have the solutions, but it helps you really tease out like, how do you think about teaching someone something new?
That is so true. And thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that is something, again, I definitely would like to do at some point. But when you kind of step back for a moment and think of having these conversations with entrepreneurs about, you know, how to solve their problems, what challenges they're facing, like those answers are a gold mine. And as you mentioned, as the person doing the research and creating the course, then you figure out in your mind and structure it in a way on how you are going to solve that. So they are giving you the cues.
Yep.
What they're looking for in a course.
Yep. And it's natural networking. So after you build your course, then you go back to that list of people that you interviewed and you're like, hey, remember when we had that conversation? I built this course. So it's the listening tour is just, it is the best thing that I ever learned how to do in my business. I use it all the time.
Oh my God, I love how you describe that listening tour. And I, for instance, just set more of a market survey that I sent out, and I am blown away by the responses. And now I'm having, I guess, my listening tour in reference to that research. Oh my gosh, Sarah, I could talk for like another hour or two. For real. This has been such an amazing conversation, and I really want to take this opportunity to share how proud I am of you that you wrote something. I mean, it is an amazing book, and obviously I've read a lot. I'm kind of a nerd as far as that goes, and there's a word for people who have books, and I don't recall what the name of it is, but I am that person.
I am probably that person too. So I'm with you.
I see your bookshelf in the back.
Yes, I read a lot of books.
Yes. I hope that you will definitely consider coming back again soon so we can discuss the next phase.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Wonderful. And before we signed off, I just want to thank everyone currently on the Wisdom Audio app for being here today. I see some familiar names, so thank you so much for being here today. Sarah, where can our viewers and listeners connect with you further?
So you can find me, my website is fruitioninitiatives.com, and you can find all of my things there. And I have a Substack called The Hustler's Manifesto. You can find that at thehustlersmanifesto.com, all one word. And then you can find me on Instagram at hustlers_manifesto.
Wonderful. And of course, I will make sure all that information is in the show notes. Thank you again so much for being here today. Truly, your book has inspired me. Like there's so many different ideas going on. There's a lot of popping going on up there, and it's probably why I'm having a bad hair day. But anyway, I digress. Thank you so much again, Sarah. Remember, if you have a story to share, somebody needs to hear it. Somebody needs to hear your authentic voice. Today, I am so inspired by Sarah and her book. My name is Janice Malillo, the host of Stories That Inspire Us, the author series, and we shall see you again very soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye for now.